All right, let's dive into something a little different today.
Ooh, sounds intriguing.
We're tackling Mark Manson's The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fick.
Okay.
It's widely popular, but there's some real wisdom tucked away in this unconventional self-help book.
Yeah, it's definitely not your typical self-help book, that's for sure.
Right.
It kind of throws out the rule book and says, hey, life's going to have problems, so
Right.
let's get good at choosing the right ones to sweat.
We're going to break down some of the big ideas, pull out the most surprising examples, and by the end,
Yeah.
I guarantee you'll have a whole new perspective on what's worth your energy.
And speaking of energy, one of the first things Manson tackles is this idea
Okay.
that sometimes the path to success is actually paved with not trying so hard.
Okay, now that sounds counterintuitive.
Yeah.
Tell me more.
He uses Charles Bukowski as an example.
Okay.
And if you're not familiar,
Yeah.
let's just say Bukowski was a character.
Okay.
Hard drinking, rough around the edges, not exactly
Yeah.
positive affirmations.
Yeah. Not the guy you'd picture on a motivational poster.
Exactly. Bukowski spent years writing about the underbelly of life,
Oh, wow.
basically embracing the loser label. But here's the thing.
Yeah.
By owning his flaws and writing with brutal honesty, he actually became incredibly successful.
So, in a way, his success came from not trying to fit the mold
Yeah,
of what a successful writer should be.
precisely. And that's a core part of Manson's argument.
Okay.
He says we get so caught up in chasing these external ideas of happiness,
Right.
more money, the perfect job, a million followers,
Right.
that we create this never-ending cycle of feeling inadequate.
It's like we're on this hamster wheel of not enough.
Yeah.
And it just keeps spinning.
It's what he calls the feedback loop from hell.
Okay.
You feel anxious about not being where you should be,
Mm-hmm.
then you feel even worse for feeling anxious in the first place. It's exhausting.
Okay, so how do we break free from that? Where does the not giving effect part come in?
It's about short-circuiting that loop,
Okay.
not by becoming apathetic,
Yeah. Right.
but by recognizing that it's okay to not be perfect.
Okay.
It's okay to feel those negative emotions sometimes. It's what we do with them that matters.
So it's not about denying the negative feelings,
Right.
but rather shifting our focus to what we can actually control.
Exactly. Think about it this way. If you burn your hand on a stove,
Yeah.
the pain tells you to pull away.
Right.
It's a signal that something's wrong
Right.
and needs to change.
Pain serves a purpose.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Emotional pain is similar.
Okay.
Feeling anxious, frustrated, even sad. Those are signals too.
Right.
They're telling us that something needs attention,
Right.
that there's a problem to be solved.
So we shouldn't try to suppress those emotions,
Right.
but rather understand what they're trying to tell us.
That's a key takeaway.
Okay.
And that leads us to another big idea Manson introduces.
Right.
He says, happiness isn't some finish line we cross.
Okay.
It's an ongoing process of solving problems.
Okay. But don't we all wish happiness were a bit simpler than that?
Yeah, he gets that.
Who wants more problems?
And to make the point, he uses this hilarious analogy, the disappointment panda.
The disappointment panda.
Imagine a panda in a superhero costume going around telling people blunt truths about themselves.
I'm picturing it now, and it's both terrifying and hilarious.
The panda represents that dose of reality we all need sometimes.
Okay.
Not to wallow in negativity,
Right.
but because facing those truths is the first step to actually solving the problems
Right.
that are causing us unhappiness.
So we're not chasing some magical state of perpetual bliss,
No.
but rather becoming better problem solvers.
Right. And this is where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
Manson says not all problems are created equal.
Okay.
Some are actually good problems to have.
Hold on. Good problems. I'm not sure I follow.
He argues that problems are inevitable, but we get to choose which ones to focus on.
Okay.
Think of it like this. There's a difference between struggling to master a new skill
Okay.
and constantly stressing over something you have zero control over, like your height.
Ah, so it's about picking challenges that actually lead to growth and fulfillment.
Exactly. Those are the good problems.
Okay.
They push us out of our comfort zones and make us better versions of ourselves.
I'm starting to see how this ties back to the not giving a feck idea.
Yeah,
It's about being selective with our energy and attention.
precisely.
Yeah.
And that selectivity extends to our emotions too.
Okay.
Manson makes a crucial distinction between being responsible for our emotions
Okay.
and being at fault for them.
That's an interesting point. I think we often conflate the two.
We do. Manson uses the example of getting dumped by a cheating girlfriend.
Oh, okay.
He wasn't at fault for her actions, but he realized he was still responsible
Okay.
for his own healing and happiness moving forward.
That resonates with me.
Yeah.
I remember when I got laid off from a job I really loved.
Oh, yeah.
It was devastating, but eventually I had to stop dwelling on what my old boss did
Right.
and focus on what I could control: my next steps, my attitude, my skill set.
It's a tough lesson, but a powerful one.
Taking responsibility empowers us to move forward, even when life throws curveballs.
Right.
And that's a huge part of what not giving effect is all about.
Mm.
Not letting external circumstances dictate our internal state.
Okay, so we're choosing our problems, taking responsibility for our emotions.
Yeah.
What else is there to not give a feck about?
Well, Manson argues that we should also question some of our most deeply held beliefs.
Whoa.
He says many of our values are based on memories and biases that we don't even consciously choose.
Whoa, that's a big one.
Yeah.
How do we even begin to unpack that?
He describes this fascinating experiment where people were put in a room with buttons,
Okay.
convinced that a certain sequence would make a light flash,
Yeah.
but the light was actually random.
Why?
They created these elaborate theories about the code, even though there was none.
Wait, so they were making connections that didn't actually exist. That's both hilarious and kind of unsettling.
Right. And Manson uses this to illustrate how our minds crave patterns and meaning.
Even when they're not there,
Yeah.
we tell ourselves stories about why things happen, even if those stories are based on faulty logic or misinterpretations.
So we're basically walking around with these narratives in our heads that might not even be true.
And those narratives shape our values, our choices, our entire worldview.
Wow.
So a big part of not giving a feck is learning to be more critical of those stories we tell ourselves.
Okay, I'm definitely seeing the subtle art part now.
Yeah.
This isn't about being careless or apathetic.
Yeah.
It's about getting really honest with ourselves, even when it's uncomfortable.
Exactly. And speaking of uncomfortable, another case Manson brings up is Meredith,
Okay.
a woman who actually constructed a false memory of being abused by her father.
Wow, that's intense.
It was an intentional deceit on her part.
Okay.
Her mind, trying to make sense of her pain, latched onto abuse as the explanation.
Okay.
She was surrounded by those kinds of stories, both personally and professionally,
Right.
and it influenced her memory.
That's a powerful example of how our environment and existing beliefs can warp our perception of reality.
It's a cautionary tale,
Yeah.
reminding us that even our most deeply held convictions might not be as objective as we think.
So, if our beliefs are so fallible, how do we know what to trust?
Yeah.
How do we even begin to sort through all of this?
Well, Manson suggests that instead of clinging to the idea of certainty, we should actually embrace doubt.
Okay.
Questioning our assumptions, even the ones that feel fundamental, opens us up to new possibilities
Yeah.
and deeper understanding. It's like that old saying, the only true wisdom is in knowing you know nothing.
Right.
The more we're willing to admit we might be wrong,
Yeah.
the more open we become to actually learning and growing.
So how do we put this into practice? I mean, it's one thing to say, question everything,
Right.
but it's another to actually do it.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to beliefs we've held for a long time.
It's a process for sure.
Yeah.
One thing Manson recommends is being mindful of confirmation bias. Our brains are naturally wired to seek out information that confirms what we already believe,
Right.
which can keep us stuck in a limited perspective.
Oh, I see this all the time.
Yeah.
People scrolling through social media, just looking for posts that reinforce their existing opinions. It's like they're building an echo chamber of
Yeah.
their own beliefs.
Exactly. So a big part of not giving a feck in this context is actively seeking out diverse perspectives,
Okay.
even those that make us uncomfortable.
Right, right.
Surround yourself with people who challenge your thinking, who see the world differently than you do.
It's about being open to having our minds changed, even if it means admitting we were wrong about something,
Yeah.
which honestly can be a really humbling experience.
Humbling, but ultimately freeing.
Yeah.
And speaking of freedom, Manson argues that a key part of not giving a feck is the power of rejection.
Okay.
Not just rejecting things we don't want in our lives,
Right.
but also being okay with being rejected.
I think a lot of people struggle with that.
Oh, yeah.
Rejection can be so painful. We're
Mhm.
conditioned to seek approval, to be liked, to fit in.
Absolutely. And Manson really pushes back against that.
Okay.
He even takes on the classic love story, Romeo and Juliet.
Okay, that's unexpected.
Yeah.
How does Shakespeare fit into all of this?
Manson argues that Romeo and Juliet's relationship, while romanticized,
Yeah.
was actually based on escaping problems, not facing them head on.
Okay.
They were so obsessed with each other that they lost sight of everything else, which ultimately led to tragedy.
So he's saying it wasn't true love, but rather a way to avoid dealing with the realities of their lives.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
He contrasts this with healthy love, which involves strong boundaries and the willingness to both reject and be rejected.
Okay.
It's about choosing a partner who respects your individuality, not someone who completes you or fixes your problems.
That's a really important distinction. I
Yeah.
think a lot of people get caught up in the idea of finding someone to complete them,
Right.
but that can lead to unhealthy codependency.
It's a recipe for disaster. When our happiness hinges on another person meeting all our needs,
Right.
we set ourselves up for disappointment.
Yeah.
Manson argues that true love is about two whole individuals choosing to be together,
Yeah.
not two halves desperately trying to make a whole.
And that takes us back to taking responsibility, right?
Exactly.
We can't control how our partners behave,
Right.
but we can control how we respond,
Yeah.
how we set boundaries, how we choose to show up in the relationship.
Perfectly said. And this all ties into another key concept, the freedom of commitment.
Okay.
It might seem counterintuitive,
Okay.
but Manson argues that committing to something,
Okay.
whether it's a partner, a career, a creative pursuit, or even just a set of values,
Okay.
can actually be incredibly liberating.
Okay. I have to admit that one threw me for a loop at first.
Yeah.
We're so often told to keep our options open,
Right.
to never settle, to constantly be striving for more.
Right. But Manson says that this endless pursuit of options can actually lead to more anxiety and less satisfaction.
Okay.
He calls it the paradox of choice. Yeah. When we have too many choices, we can become overwhelmed
Right.
and paralyzed by indecision.
Mm-hmm.
We're constantly second-guessing ourselves,
Right.
wondering if we're missing out on something better.
I've definitely fallen into that trap before.
Oh.
It's like you're always looking over your shoulder, wondering if the grass is greener on the other side.
And that prevents you from fully appreciating what you have right in front of you.
Right.
Manson argues that commitment frees us from this constant comparison and FOMO.
It's like saying, okay, this is what I've chosen. This is where I'm putting my energy.
Yeah.
I'm going to invest in this fully, and I'm not going to worry about what I might be missing out on elsewhere.
That's the essence of it.
Yeah.
And he backs this up with his own personal experience.
Okay.
For years, he was bouncing around, trying different things, chasing the next exciting opportunity.
Yeah.
But he found more success and deeper satisfaction when he finally made the decision to commit to writing, to a partner, to a location.
So by letting go of the need for constant novelty and exploration, he actually opened himself up to a more fulfilling life.
Exactly. And it challenges us to examine our own relationship with commitment.
Okay.
Are we truly free when we're constantly chasing the next best thing?
Right.
Or do we find a deeper sense of freedom when we choose to invest in something wholeheartedly?
It's a thought-provoking question for sure.
Yeah.
And it makes me wonder if sometimes we confuse freedom with having unlimited options, when maybe true freedom is about making conscious choices and committing to them, even if it means closing some doors along the way.
That's a really insightful observation.
Yeah.
And this leads us to the final and perhaps most profound theme in the book.
Okay.
Death.
Okay, wow, that took a turn. But I guess it makes sense if we're talking about what truly matters.
Right.
What's worth giving a feck about.
Yeah.
We can't really ignore the fact that our time is limited, right?
Exactly. Manson doesn't shy away from the reality of our mortality.
Ugh.
In fact, he argues that embracing the fact that we're all going to die can actually be one of the most liberating things we can do.
I think that's a really hard concept for a lot of people to grasp.
Yeah.
Death is something we tend to avoid thinking about, to push away.
It's natural to feel that way.
Yeah.
But Manson suggests that if we can shift our perspective and view death not as something to be feared, but as a natural part of life,
Right.
it can actually help us live more fully in the present moment.
I'm curious to hear more about this.
Okay.
How does he suggest we make that shift?
Well, he starts by sharing the story of his friend Josh, who died tragically at a young age.
Oh, wow.
Josh's death was a wake-up call for Manson, forcing him to confront his own mortality and reevaluate his priorities.
It's amazing how often loss can be a catalyst for that kind of introspection.
Yeah.
Suddenly, all the things that seem so important fade away, and you're left with what truly matters.
Exactly. And Manson connects this to the work of Ernest Becker, an anthropologist who argued that much of human behavior is driven by an unconscious fear of death.
Huh?
Becker suggested that we create these immortality projects, careers, relationships, achievements, as a way to cope with this existential dread.
So we're basically trying to leave our mark on the world. To create something that will outlast us.
Yeah.
As a way to deal with the fear of our own non-existence.
That's the idea.
Okay.
But Manson takes this a step further.
Okay.
He argues that instead of trying to deny or escape death, we should embrace it.
Okay.
He suggests that accepting our mortality can actually free us from the need to chase external validation.
Okay.
Allowing us to focus on living a life that's true to our own values.
That's a really powerful concept.
Yeah.
It's like saying, okay, I'm going to die someday, so what am I going to do with the time I have left?
Right.
It takes the pressure off of achieving some arbitrary definition of success.
Yeah.
And allows us to focus on what actually brings us joy and fulfillment.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And Manson even describes this incredible experience he had standing on a cliff in South Africa.
Oh, wow.
Where he felt the reality of his own mortality in a very visceral way.
I can imagine that was both terrifying and profound.
It was, but it was also a turning point for him.
Okay.
It made him realize that true freedom comes not from denying our limitations, but from embracing them.
Okay.
It's about letting go of the need to control everything and accepting the messy, unpredictable nature of life.
It's almost like death becomes this guiding principle, reminding us to cherish each moment and not waste time on things that don't truly matter.
It's a powerful shift in perspective.
Yeah.
And Manson argues that this awareness of our own mortality can be a source of incredible motivation and inspiration.
It's like a reminder to make the most of the time we have, to live intentionally.
Right.
To focus on creating a legacy that we can be proud of.
Exactly. And it brings us back to that central question. What are you willing to give a feck about? Knowing that our time is limited, what are the things that we're going to choose to invest our energy in? What are the values that are going to guide our lives?
It really puts things into perspective, doesn't it? I mean, when you frame it that way, it makes all the little annoyances and anxieties of daily life seem so insignificant.
It's a powerful lens to view things through. And Manson argues that this awareness of our own mortality shouldn't lead to despair or recklessness, but rather to a deeper appreciation for life and a greater sense of purpose.
So it's not about saying YOLO and throwing all caution to the wind.
No.
It's about being intentional with our choices and focusing on what truly aligns with our values.
Precisely. It's about choosing to give our flanks wisely. And that brings us to the more practical side of things. How do we actually put this subtle art into practice in our daily lives?
Yeah, I'm ready for some actionable takeaways here. What are the steps we can take to start giving better flanks?
Well, Manson suggests starting by identifying our values. What are the principles that are most important to us? What do we want to stand for in the world?
It's like figuring out our own personal code of conduct, right? The things that we're not willing to compromise on no matter what.
Exactly. And he emphasizes that these values should come from within, not from external expectations or societal pressures. It's about figuring out what truly matters to you, not what you think you should care about.
I think that can be a tough one for a lot of people. We're so bombarded with messages about what success looks like, what happiness should feel like. It's easy to lose sight of our own internal compass.
It's true. But taking the time to define our values is crucial, because those values will guide our decisions, our actions, and ultimately the kind of life we create.
So once we've figured out our values, what's the next step?
Action. It's not enough to simply define our values. We have to actively live in accordance with them. And that means making choices that align with those values, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it means going against the grain.
It's about walking the walk, not just talking the talk.
Exactly. And that might mean having difficult conversations, setting boundaries, saying no to things that don't serve us, even if it means disappointing others.
And it also means embracing the possibility of failure, right? I mean, if we're going to step outside of our comfort zones and try new things, we're bound to stumble along the way.
Absolutely. And Manson reminds us that failure is not the opposite of success. It's part of the journey. It's through our mistakes that we learn, adapt, and ultimately become more resilient.
It's like that saying, fail forward. We don't have to be perfect. We just have to keep moving forward, even if it's one messy step at a time.
And that's a huge part of what not giving a feck is all about: letting go of the need to control everything and embracing the messy, unpredictable nature of life.
So to bring it back to Manson's central question.
Yeah.
What are you willing to give a feck about?
It's a question that each of us has to answer for ourselves. There's no right or wrong answer. It's about defining our own values and living in alignment with them.
And it's about recognizing that we have a limited amount of time and energy, so we need to choose wisely where we invest those precious resources.
Manson's message is both challenging and liberating. It encourages us to take responsibility for our own lives, to embrace the messy, unpredictable nature of existence, and to create a legacy that we can be proud of.
So there you have it, a deep dive into the subtle art of not giving a fuck. We've explored some of the key concepts from the book and hopefully sparked some reflection on your own values and priorities. And as Manson would say, go out there and start giving better fucks.